Alright, hi everyone. This is for Blue. Hi Blue. This is the last of this set of commissions for you. It's chapter 10, Dealing with Dragons. It's called, in which Shimmerine and Alienora conduct some tests and disturb a wizard. Good. Fuck wizards. Back in the kitchen, Shimmerine and Alienora quickly determined that the fireproofing spell had indeed worked. First Shimmerine, then Alienora tossed a pinch of feverfew into the air and sighted the spellverse, then put a hand into a candle flame and held it there. Neither was burned at all, though Alienora claimed that the candle tickled almost as much as the eagle feather had done. How long does the spell last? Alienora asked. I'm not sure exactly, Shimmerine said. At least an hour, but I'll have to do some tests to pin it down beyond that. I hope Kazul gets back soon. I want to see if it works with dragon fire. You're going to have Kazul breathe fire at you just to see if the spell works? Alienora said, horrified. What if it doesn't? Then I'll talk to Kazul and we'll go see Morwen, and the three of us will try to figure out what to change to make the spell work for Dragonfire too. Don't look at me like that. I'm not going to stand in front of Kazul and have her breathe fire at me. I'll just stick out a finger the way we did with the candle. This wasn't enough to convince Alienora, but Shimmerine was determined. The whole point of trying the spell was to make ourselves immune to Dragonfire, she said. If it doesn't work, I don't want to find out for the first time when one of Kazul's guests gets mad and breathes fire at me because it doesn't like the way I cooked his cherries jubilee. Is that the only thing dragons eat? Alienora had to admit that this was a good point, but she was still disposed to argue. The discussion was cut short by Kazul's return. At first the dragon was more inclined to agree with Alienora than with Shimmerine, but after Shimmerine proved her invulnerability to candle flames, lighted torches, and the fire she'd built in the kitchen stove, Kazul agreed to a trial. She insisted, however, on working up to full firepower in gradual stages, and Shimmerine was forced to agree. Before they began, Shimmerine threw another pinch of feverfew into the air and recited the couplet again, just to be sure the spell wouldn't wear off in the middle of the test. Then Kazul lowered her head nearly to the ground, and Alienora watched nervously as Shimmerine lowered her hand slowly into various intensities of dragon flame. Finally, Shimmerine stood right in front of Kazul while the dragon breathed her hottest. The spell worked perfectly every time. That's so surreal! There, Shimmerine said when Kazul stopped at last. Now we know it works. Aren't you glad? I'm glad, Alienora said fervently, and I hope I never have to watch anything like that again as long as I live. I didn't dare blink for fear you'd go up and smoke while my eyes were closed. Why don't you try it yourself? Shimmerine said mischievously. No, said Alienora and Kazul together. Watching you was bad enough, Alienora went on with a shudder. I believe it works. I don't see any reason for me to test it. Besides, I've done more than enough fire breathing for one day, Kazul said. I'm starting to get overheated. That's a thing? All right, if you don't want to, you don't have to, Shimmerine said. If we're all done, I'd better go tidy up. Alienora stayed to help Shimmerine finish cleaning up traces of the spell, by which she had calmed down considerably and was very nearly her usual self again. Shimmerine gave her a pouch full of dried feverfew because she left and made her recite the words that activated the spell several times to make sure she had memorized them correctly. Remember, you only have to repeat the first half of the verse to get the spell going now that it's been set up, Shimmerine said. Can you do it? It's only two lines, and they rhyme, Alienora said, laughing. How could I forget that? Memory isn't that bad. Maybe not, but say it anyway, Shimmerine said. Alienora laughed again and did so. At last she set off into the tunnels, and Shimmerine went back to the main cave to see what Kazul and Roxime had found out about the caves of fire and night. Kazul was somewhat out of temper, and Shimmerine thought privately that she had been telling the truth about getting overheated. Rather than annoy the dragon further, Shimmerine asked if she could read the book Kazul had borrowed from Morwen. It's in the treasure room, Kazul said. Read it there, and I hope you see something in it that we didn't. Oh, boy. Shimmerine nodded, picked up her lamp, and hurried off before Kazul could change her mind. The book was lying near a pile of sapphires next to an ornate gold crown. Just casually, next to a fortune. She picked it up, went over to the table, which was large and very sturdy, because it was intended for counting piles of gold and silver coins, and sat down to read. It was even drier and duller than Kazul had said. There were a great many mayhaps and perchances and wherefores strung together in long, involved sentences that compared the strange and wonderful things in the cave to obscure philosophical ideas and odd customs from places Shimmerine had never heard of. After a few pages, Shimmerine put the book down and went and got a quill pen, an ink pot, and some paper so that she could write down the things she thought were important. She didn't want to have to read A Journey Through the Caves of Fire and Night more than once. For the next 3 days, Shimmerine spent bits of her spare time in the treasure room, taking notes on the de Montmorency. It took her that long because she could never manage to read for more than a little while without getting so bored that she nearly fell asleep. Her persistence gained her several pages of notes about the caves, but nothing that seemed as if it might be of particular interest to wizards. Interesting. It worked. Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped a sentence. Alienora came to see her a few days later, looking very cheerful. It worked, she announced as she came into the library where Shimmerine was going over her notes. Coradwell's gone. Thranduil rescued her just the way you said he would. Good, Simrian said. I'm glad something is going right. What's the problem? Eleanor asked, seating herself on the other side of the table from Simrine. This, Simrine said, waving at the paper-covered table. Kazul is sure that the key to the wizards, or the key to what the wizards are after, is somewhere in the dratted book she borrowed from Morwen. I copied out everything that looked interesting, but none of it seems like anything a wizard would care about. How do you know that? Eleanor asked curiously. I don't, Simrine said. I'm just guessing. That's the problem. Oh. Eleanor picked up the sheet of paper nearest her and frowned at it. What on earth does this mean? Simrine looked at the page Eleanor was holding. Excuse me. Thus these caves of fire and night are, in some sense, indivisible, whereas the caves of chance are, by contrast, individual, though it is preposterous to claim that these descriptions are true of either group of caves in their entirety. Ugh, that's one of the bits I copied word for word. The whole book is like that. I think it means that if you have a piece of something magical from the caves of fire and night, you can use it as a spell, or in a spell as if it were the whole thing. Huh. That's interesting. She has that rock. I can see why you wouldn't be sure, Eleonora said. Do you think it would help you figure things out if you stopped for a while? I have stopped, Simran pointed out. Or did you have something more specific in mind? I'm almost out of fever for you, Eleonora said, looking down at the table. I was hoping you'd come with me to pick some more. You're almost out, Simrina said in surprise. How did that happen? Eleonora shifted uncomfortably. I've been working that fireproofing spell every hour or so for the past 2 days, she admitted. Warhawk has been getting more and more unpredictable, and I don't feel comfortable otherwise. Helana was visiting yesterday when he came in the middle of the afternoon, and he was roaring and dripping little bits of flame when he breathed. She was terrified, and I don't blame her. If it weren't for the spell, I'd be scared to death. What's the matter with them? I don't know. He doesn't tell me anything about dragon politics or wizards or what he's been getting so worked up about. He's not like Kazul. Simrine frowned, considering. Maybe Kazul will have some idea what's bothering him. I'll ask her this evening. In the meantime, let's go get that feverfew. You're right to say that I could use a break. Oh, good, said Eleonora in tones of considerable relief. I've never picked herbs before, and I'm not sure what feverfew looks like. I don't know what I'd done if you'd said you wouldn't come. Serene put her notes away and got 2 wicker baskets and a small knife from one of the storage rooms. Up or down? Eleonora asked as they left the cage. Up, Serene said. The other way is the ledge I told you about, and I wouldn't be surprised if bits of it are still invisible. The path through this pass of silver ice twisted and turned past the openings of other dragons' caves. Most of the rocks around the caves had scorch marks, and Simrine and Eleonora didn't see much growing among them. At this rate, we'll have to go nearly all the way to the enchanted forest to find any grass, much less herbs, Eleonora complained. Wait a minute, Simrine said. Look over there, through that crack in the rocks. Doesn't that look like something green? Eleonora's eyes followed Simrine's pointing fingers. Yes, she said, without enthusiasm. It looks green. The rock Simrine had indicated was a large boulder at the bottom of a steep slope. The slope was covered with gravel and looked as if it would be impossible to climb down without skinning a knee or an elbow at least. The boulder itself was in 2 pieces, with just enough space between them for someone to squeeze through, provided the someone was not very large. Come on, let's get a better look, said Simrine. She was on the edge of the slope and wrapped her skirts tightly around her legs. Then she sat down with her basket in her lap and slid down the slope, raising an enormous cloud of dust, sounding like an avalanche in the process. She reached the bottom in safety and stood up, brushing at her skirt. The dust was so thick that she could hardly see, and when she tried to call Eleonora, she coughed so hard that she could barely speak. Simrine, are you all right? It's just the dust, Simrine said in a muffled voice. She had taken out her handkerchief and put it over her mouth and nose to keep the dust out. It wasn't perfect, but it helped a great deal. Come on, it's your turn. Are you sure we shouldn't just go around? Stop stalling. It's not that bad. That's what you say, Eleonora muttered, but she wrapped her skirts around her, clutched her basket, and slid down the slope. She made even more noise than Simrine had. When she got to the bottom, she was coughing and choking. Simrine handed her the handkerchief, and they waited for a moment while the dust settled. Crawling through the split boulder was easier than they expected. The crevice was wider than it had looked from the path, and the bottom of the crack was so full of dust and gravel and dead leaves that it was almost flat. Simrine and Eleonora had to walk single file, but there were 1 or 2 spots where they had to turn sideways in order to get through, but it was not really difficult. On the other side of the boulder, the 2 girls found, a lush green valley. It was bowl-shaped and not very large, but flowers and grasses stood waist-high between the random clumps of bushes that dotted the valley floor. A squirrel, which had been sunning itself on a ledge near the entrance, leaped for a small tree as Simrine and Eleonora appeared. My goodness, Eleonora said, looking around with wide eyes. This place looks as if no one but us has ever been here before. There aren't even any scorch marks on the rocks. Simrine blinked. Eleonora was right. Lichens covered the weathered gray rocks that rose above the valley, and small plants grew in cracks and crevices that showed no sign of the touch of dragon fire. That's odd, Simrine commented. Yes. Why? Eleonora asked. Those mountains aren't tall enough to keep dragons from flying over, and they're right in the middle of the dragon's territory. So why haven't the dragons found any? Why haven't the dragons been here? They usually keep a close eye on everything that belongs to them. Maybe they have been here, but they never found anything to breathe fire at, Eleanor said. Well, I'm going to ask Azul about it when I get back, Simrine said as she waded into the grass. Why don't you take that side and I'll look over here? We'll cover more ground that way. First, you'd better show me what what I'm looking for, Eleanor said apologetically. I'm afraid I couldn't tell Feverfew from carrots if there was a dragon chasing me and my life depended on it. Simrine nodded, and they started off. They had not gone far when she saw a patch of the white button-shaped flowers she was looking for. Here, she said, showing them to Eleonora. This is Feverfew. The younger plants are the best, the ones that haven't blossomed yet. Eleonora studied the leaves and flowers with care. I think I'll recognize it now. They cut some of the plants, leaving those that were blooming. You find the next patch, Simrine said as they started off again. Let's try over there, Eleonora said, pointing. They found several more patches of feverfew, and gradually their baskets began to fill. I think this should be enough, Simrine said at last. Unless you think... Simrine! Eleonora hissed, clutching at Simrine's arm. Oh. There's someone behind that bush. Who is a creep? What are you doing hiding in a bush? Simrine turned. A dark line snaked through the grass where something large had bent and broken the plants in passing. You're right, she said, and started forward. Eleonora hung back, still holding Simrine's arm. You're not going to go look, are you? How else are we going to find out who it is? Simrine asked repeatedly. By running away. Oh, God. She shook off Eleonora's hand. Quietly, she walked over to the clump of bushes and peered around it. Eleonora followed with evident reluctance. A man in blue and brown silk robes was crouched on the inside of the bush, with his back towards Simrine. He was stuffing saw-edged purple leaves into a small linen bag the size of Simrine's hand. His hair was brown, and on the ground beside him lay a long, polished snap. Antorel? Simrine said in surprise. Why is he there? The man snatched up his staff and straightened as if a bee had just stung him. It was indeed Antorel, and he did not look at all pleased to see her. He stuffed the linen bag quickly into his sleeve and said, Princess Simrine, what brings you here? I was about to ask you the same thing, Simrine said. Wizards go where they wish, answering to no one, Antorel said, waving his free hand in a lofty manner. Maybe outside the mountains of morning they do, but around here they have to check with the dragons first, Simrine said. You know nothing of the matter, Antorel said, looking very put out. Simrine. Eleonora's tone was doubtful. You know this person? I'm sorry, I should have introduced you. This is Antorel, one of the wizards I told you about. Antorel, this is Princess Eleonora of the Duchy of Turon Marsh. At the moment, she's the princess of the Dragon Warog. Eleonora curtsied, murmuring something polite and inaudible. Antorel, who stiffened in surprise when he realized that Simrine was not alone, relaxed visibly. Warog's princess. That's all right, then. Though he really shouldn't have sent you. But Warog didn't... Ow, said Eleonora. The ow was because Simrine had hastily kicked her ankle to keep her from telling Antorel too much. Didn't what? Antorel said, frowning suspiciously. Didn't know you were going to be here, Simrine said. Well, of course he didn't know, Antorel said, looking annoyed. That's the whole point, after all. Simrine would have very much liked to ask him what the point was, but she was afraid it would make him suspicious again. I don't understand, she said instead, batting her eyes at him. Of course not, Antorel replied in a condescending tone that made Simrine's teeth hurt. But it doesn't matter. I'm not annoyed with you. I'm so glad, Simrine murmured. Antorel gave her an oily smile. In fact, there's no need to tell Warog that you met me here. I wouldn't dream of it, Simrine said with the perfect truth. Excellent, Antorel said. Then may I escort the two of you back to the path? Eleonora looked hopefully in Simrine's direction. But we can't leave yet, Simrine said, opening her eyes very wide. We haven't picked any cornflowers or daisies. Behind her, she heard Eleonora making a smothered, choking noise as if she were trying very hard not to laugh. Daisies, Antorel said, in a flat, incredulous tone. You want to stay and pick daisies? Simrine nodded vigorously. And cornflowers, and flax, and all sorts of things, she said, waving her hand at the flowers blooming all around. They'll look so pretty in a bowl of water in the kitchen. I'm sure you're right, Antorel said. He looked as if he would have liked to object, but couldn't think of anything to object to. Perhaps I could help you, he said reluctantly. Oh, we wouldn't dream of keeping you, Simrine said. Antorel was clearly reluctant to leave the two girls in the valley, but Simrine did not give him much choice. After another minute or so of conversation, the wizard was forced to go. He did not use a vanishing spell, but trudged away on foot. Simrine watched him until he was out of sight among the bushes, wondering whether he had some special reason not to use spell in the valley, or whether he simply didn't know the right spells to make himself vanish. That is a mystery. Okay, I'm going to make another video and keep reading this chapter.